Tonight Show, we're going to share a brief documentary on Jimmy Carter and foreign policies. That includes interviews with people who were directly affected by the decisions that he made. We hope you enjoy.
My name is Robert Thompson, and tonight we are going to learn about foreign policy decisions made by President Jimmy Carter. We will show you interviews and debates that we prompted to help you learn and understand what took place over the years that Carter was president. The Panama Canal being signed, the energy crisis, the Camp David Accords, and the Iranian hostage crisis all took place over these years. We'll start with the Panama Canal. In 1941, the Panama Canal was opened. It was a 51-mile shortcut that allowed ships to cut down on what would be an 8,000-mile journey. It was controlled by the U.S., however, on September 7, 1977, President Jimmy Carter signed the Panama Canal Treaty and Neutrality Treaty, promising to give control of the canal back to the Panamanians by the year 2000. Here with Javier Rodriguez, a Panamanian official. Javier, could you please tell us about how Carter signing over the Panama Canal back to your country has benefited the public?
It's benefited our country by providing jobs for our people, revenue for our country, and a tourist attraction for our country as well.
What has receiving the Panama Canal meant to you and your country?
By receiving the Panama Canal, our country has gained a sense of pride because we've been wanting this land for a while and we haven't had it for quite a while, and now that we have it back, we have a sense of nationalism and pride.
Since Carter signed over the treaty back to your country, has the view of America been better or worse?
The view of America by the Panamanian public has improved greatly because of Carter's willingness to sign over our land back to us.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for your insight. What do you think about Carter signing over the Panama Canal to the Panamanians?
I'm very angry that Carter signed over the Panama Canal to the Panamanians. Even though it was their land, it still was a very big profit for the U.S. and brought us lots of revenue. It was big.
Do you think most of the public shares your opinion?
Yes, most of my friends that I've talked to are also upset with us signing over the Panama Canal. And a poll showed that 3/4 of the Americans also agree with me.
Thank you. As a result of the Iranian Revolution and the embargoes, people were furious about the cost of gas. Much of that anger was directed at the White House. Carter's approval rating had dropped to 25% lower than Richard Nixon's during the Watergate scandal.
Due to a Middle Eastern conflict and U.S. siding with Israel, Egypt got very mad with America and forced embargoes on oil, which raised the prices extremely high. However, U.S. benefited from this because it forced us to think of alternative ways to raise energy, and we got renewable energy. Interviewing Bill Klein on the U.S. energy crisis.
Thank you for having me.
What ways have you had to cut down on energy?
Well, we have to use less gas because of its cost and it's really expensive. And also due to President Carter's legislation, we had to, our AC could only go down to 55 degrees and then our heating could only be put up to 65.
Do you think Carter handled this energy crisis well?
I do not. I think he handled it very poorly.
Thank you.
During the energy crisis, Carter had given many speeches, but before he wrote his last speech, he realized that the public had stopped listening and instead went to Camp David and brought in lots of people to talk about what could be done. By this time, the public was already outraged.
After Carter became president, he initiated peace talks by diplomatic efforts with Egypt and Israel. The Camp David Accords were a result of a 14-month process, and on September 17, 1978, following the 12 days of secret negotiations at Camp David, a deal was signed by Egyptian President Anwar el-Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. Due to the argument, Sadat and Begin received the shared 1978 Nobel Peace Prize. We were very fortunate to be able to interview one of Carter's advisors during the Camp David Accords.
Sitting here with Kevin Johnson, one of Carter's advisors, and I'm going to ask him a few questions about the Camp David Accords. What exactly was President Carter able to accomplish at the Camp David Accords?
Carter was able to bring together the countries of Israel and Egypt to discuss peace in the Middle East, and as a result, he was able to keep both the representatives after they really hadn't had much direction or anything towards peace, and he ended up making some peace in a war-torn area like the Middle East.
Were they always willing to cooperate with each other, or was President Carter the main reason that they got along?
They were not always willing to cooperate, with Egyptian President Anwar el-Sadat threatening to leave during the summit. Carter certainly was influential in keeping both nations' leaders at the summit. However, though Carter was effective in the peace talks, I do not think he is the only person who could have accomplished keeping the leaders discussing peace. In addition, the peace he created did not last in the long term, and the U.S. had more negative interactions in peace in the future.
Thank you, Kevin Johnson.
On November 4th, 1979, a mob of 3,000 Iranian protesters invaded the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, Iran. 66 U.S. citizen hostages were taken and held captive that day. They remained in the U.S. Embassy underground for many months to come. Here is an interview with a released hostage.
I'm sitting here with Ryan McDonough, who was a former hostage of the Iranian crisis. How do you think the situation was handled?
I think the situation was handled quite poorly, with Carter taking too long with his decisions, being indecisive, and just generally clumsy with everything he did to deal with the crisis.
Operation Eagle Claw was an attempt to rescue the diplomats held in Iran and end the hostage crisis. The mission was an embarrassing failure for Carter. 8 helicopters took off in the beginning of the mission, and before they even got to the target, 3 helicopters had crashed. 8 servicemen had died, and Carter admitted that the failure is likely what caused Reagan's victory in the 1980 presidential election.
Go.
Based off what you know about Operation Eagle Claw and the reasons behind it, do you think it was necessary?
I don't think it was necessary. From what I know, some soldiers died. That was pretty terrible. 8 of them, and I mean, we were suffering and everything. But if Carter won, Carter just poorly decided to use military action. He should have just stuck with diplomacy, even if he really wasn't doing too well, and tried to just power through it.
What were the conditions like at the U.S. Embassy during captivity?
I was just in a constant state of fear, with guns always be pointing at us, I'm always being blindfolded, there was just mass confusion. It was terrible, real terrible. And they only took our blindfolds off to bring us upstairs and question us.
What happened, and how did it feel to be released after 444 days?
Well, we were wearing blindfolds, and they eventually took our blindfolds off, and we were on a bus heading to the airport, and they started taking off our handcuffs, and they were like, oh, no talking, and we just kind of ignored them and started hugging, and, because we just had finally seen people, and just people we hadn't seen in a while, and just glad to be alive, and I was just hoping to be home as soon as possible.
Messages were released January 21st, 1981. Similar with Mr. McDonough, the U.S. public was very mad about how Carter dealt with this situation, and the fact that American citizens were tortured and held captive for so long. It made the American people more mad and very concerned with the government.
The Panama Canal was signed back to the Panamanians in September 1977, and although it was beneficial to the country of Panama, the American public was not happy with the decision that Carter made. Due to protests and Iranian revolutions in 1979 and 1980, the price of oil shot up and the United States was faced with an energy crisis. The people blamed Carter and his approval rating dropped. The situation did, however, prove to be positive in some way because it helped the country shift towards better energy and more renewable energy. The Camp David Accords brought peace between Israel and Egypt, which was a result of Carter's diplomacy. The entire process took 14 months, but finished on September 17, 1978. Even after protests in Egypt and the assassination of Sadat, relations between Israel and Egypt still remained peaceful, which shows the concreteness of the treaty. Finally, the Iranian hostage crisis. The hostages were captured on November 4th, 1979, and were held until January 20th, 1981. They were held for 444 days. Carter attempted to rescue them in Operation Eagle Claw. However, it was a complete disaster. 8 soldiers died, and 3 helicopters crashed. The hostages were finally released when Ronald Reagan became president, so the Iranians could show their hatred towards Carter. These were the most important foreign policy events that took place during Carter's presidency. Do you think he did a good job? Thank you.
And they only took our blindfolds off to question us and bring us up. What? It was bring us upstairs and question us?
Nope.
Are you cross-eyed? Alright, where are you going? I'm going.
The countries of Israel and Egypt to discuss peace in the Middle East.
Kevin Johnson, one of Carter's advisors, and I'm going to ask him a few questions about the Camp David Accords. What exactly was President Carter able to accomplish at the Camp David Accords?
You're supposed to stop.
Sorry.
Damn it.